There's a hard truth older men rarely hear. Flirting doesn't stop working with age. It stops working when you start trying too hard. You can have the career, the car, the life experience. But if you don't understand how women feel in your presence, you'll keep getting overlooked, ignored, or put in the friend zone. And deep down, you'll start to believe that your time has passed. But it hasn't. Because here's the truth. Women aren't turned off by your age. They're turned off by the energy that comes with insecurity. And the most dangerous part? You won't even realize you're making the mistake until it's too late. You'll think you're being polite. You'll think you're being mature. You'll think sharing your truth is a sign of emotional depth. But what you're really doing is bleeding masculine energy out of every interaction. And women feel that in their gut. They might smile. They might be nice. They might even stay in the conversation. But they're not attracted. They're not pulled in. They don't feel mystery, presence, strength. Because most older men were never taught this. Flirting isn't about performance. It's about pressure. Emotional pressure, uncertainty. That silent tension between two people where she's not sure what's going to happen next. But she can't stop wondering. And when you get that wrong, you become forgettable. But when you get it right, you become magnetic. This video is not about tips and tricks. It's about truth. I'm going to show you the 8 flirting mistakes most older men make. The ones that silently destroy attraction before a woman even has time to feel anything for you. If you've ever walked away from a conversation thinking, I thought it was going well, but she never replied. Or worse, you saw her lose interest in real time. This is why. Drop a comment right now if you've ever felt this shift happen. Comment. She was smiling, but I could feel her pulling away. And now, let's walk straight into the first mistake most men never notice. Number 1. Seeking approval instead of respect. Let's start with the deadliest mistake most older men make. They want to be liked more than they want to be respected. They smile too much. They agree too fast. They filter what they really think to keep the conversation smooth. And they're terrified, absolutely terrified, of creating tension. But here's the brutal truth. Women don't chase men they feel superior to. They don't crave men who are constantly trying to prove their value. They crave men who carry their value so quietly that it forces her to lean in the moment you start adjusting your words, your tone, your presence, just to keep her comfortable, just to avoid friction, just to come off well. You lose. Because real masculine attraction doesn't come from being agreeable. It comes from being grounded. And women, especially the emotionally mature ones, can feel that shift in energy from a mile away. She may not say it. She may keep smiling. She might even entertain the moment politely. But her subconscious already made a decision. He's trying to win me. He doesn't believe he is the prize. Approval seeking is like a cologne that smells like desperation. You might not think you're wearing it, but she can smell it before you say a word. Now here's what makes this even more dangerous. As an older man, you're already walking into the interaction with more perceived control. You're calmer. You've seen things. You're less reactive. And whether you realize it or not, that gives you power. But when you give it away by performing for her, you go from masculine mystery to another guy trying to win her attention. And she's seen that before, too many times. So the next time you're in a conversation, don't ask yourself, does she like me? Ask, do I respect how I'm showing up right now? Because if you respect the way you're leading, the way you speak, the way you maintain eye contact, hold your posture, own the silence, She will feel that, and you won't need to convince her of anything, because your energy will already be doing the work. Now, that brings us to the next mistake, one that hides under the surface, a mistake that feels like connection in the moment, but silently kills chemistry before it even begins. Let's talk about comfort, and why too much of it makes you invisible. Number 2, mistaking comfort for chemistry. This one hits hard, because it feels like you're doing the right thing. You're polite, you're respectful, you let her speak, you share light laughs, relatable stories, and warm eye contact. She seems relaxed, even comfortable. But then, nothing happens. She doesn't respond. She doesn't follow up. She thanks you for the conversation, but never texts back. And you're left confused thinking, but we got along so well. No, you made her feel safe, not excited. And there's a difference. You see, comfort creates friendliness, but chemistry creates tension. That magnetic pull she feels when a man's presence carries mystery. That inner whisper that says, he's not like the rest. When you give her too much comfort too fast, when you soften every edge of who you are just to make her feel at ease, you rob her of the emotional tension she subconsciously craves. Because tension is what creates possibility, and possibility is what creates desire. Too many older men confuse emotional stability with emotional flatness. They don't challenge, they don't tease, they don't flirt with their eyes, they don't carry mystery, and so they end up being liked, but not wanted. Now don't misunderstand this. Being respectful and grounded is powerful. But if that's all you bring to the table, you become the emotional equivalent of herbal tea. Nice, warm, safe, but not memorable. Here's how you fix it. You bring calm energy, but pair it with unpredictable rhythm. You hold silence a little longer. You lean back instead of leaning in. You observe more than you speak. You smile less and listen with stillness. You let her wonder what you're thinking instead of explaining every thought. That's what triggers her interest. Not your politeness, not your soft energy, but the way you hold your space with quiet tension. Chemistry lives in uncertainty, and if she knows everything about you in 5 minutes, she has nothing to feel curious about. So the next time she smiles politely while you're talking, ask yourself, is she engaged or just comfortable? Because comfort doesn't make her stay. It makes her move on politely. And that brings us to another mistake, one that's quiet, unintentional, but absolutely devastating to attraction. Let's talk about why older men talk too much and what it's costing them. Number 3, talking more than they observe. Here's something older men do without even realizing it. They try to impress women by filling every second with words. They lead with stories. They share advice. They talk about what they've seen, built, learned. And while the intention is good, the effect is the opposite. Because in the effort to be seen as interesting, they forget the most attractive men aren't the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who make women feel the most. And that happens in the space between words. In the way you observe her, in the way you respond subtly instead of reacting instantly, in the way your silence says more than your monologue ever could. When you speak too much, you don't just overwhelm the conversation, you remove her opportunity to earn your interest. And when she doesn't feel that she has to earn it, she doesn't value it. Here's the truth. Most women, especially emotionally mature ones, have heard every story, every flex, every attempt at peacocking. They don't remember what you said. They remember how they felt around you. Did they feel seen or just talked at? Did they feel drawn in? Or did they feel like they were sitting through a TED Talk with a cocktail? A man who knows how to observe how to feel the emotional tempo of a conversation, how to ask questions that make her reflect instead of perform. That man stands out because that man isn't trying to prove his worth. He's assessing hers, quietly, calmly, without saying much at all. And you know what happens when you do that? She starts leaning in. She starts wondering. She starts opening up, not because you pulled, but because you didn't push. In a world full of men trying to say the right thing, you become the man who makes her ask, what is he thinking? That question? That's the beginning of emotional tension. And tension is what she remembers. Not the perfectly crafted story about your last vacation or business success. So next time you're with a woman, try saying 30% less and watching 100% more. Let her earn the space you give her. Let her feel the gravity of your presence, not the volume of your resume. Because your value isn't in what you tell her, it's in what you choose not to. And that brings us to something even more dangerous. Let's talk about why oversharing pain early on doesn't make you deep. It makes you disposable. Before we move on, pause for a second. If any of these first 3 points made you sit back and say, damn, I've done that before, then you already know this video isn't just surface talk, it's a mirror. And if you're feeling that clarity, take 1 second to hit the like button right now. Not for me, for the version of you that's finally done making quiet mistakes that sabotage real attraction. And drop a comment below. No more shrinking to be liked. If you're ready to start showing up as the man you were meant to be. Because the next points we're about to hit, they go deeper. They're the ones that don't just kill attraction. They convince her you've never had it. Let's keep going. Number 4, showing wounds instead of wisdom. There's this idea floating around that vulnerability equals connection. That if you open up fast, share your pain, talk about your past wounds, you'll come across as emotionally available. And yes, vulnerability has power, but only when it's earned, only when it's calibrated, only when it's framed in strength, not sympathy. Most older men, especially those who've been divorced, cheated on, or burned, carry a lot. And in their effort to be real, they unload that pain way too soon. They talk about their ex, their trauma, their regrets, how they were a good man who got taken for granted. And you know what happens? She listens. She nods. She might even say, "That's really brave of you to share." But deep down, she feels like she's walking into someone else's healing process, not a fresh connection. Because here's the truth. Pain that hasn't been processed doesn't feel deep. It feels heavy. And no woman wants to carry weight she didn't sign up for. She's not here to be your therapist. She's not here to prove that she can handle your baggage. She's here to feel drawn to a man who's grounded in his path, not explaining why he got lost. If you want to share your past, do it with composure. Do it from a place of ownership, not emotional leakage. Don't say, "My last relationship broke me." Say, "I've learned to trust slower, not from fear, but from clarity." Don't say, "My ex walked away after everything I gave her." Say, "I don't overextend anymore. I value balance." This shift from wounded energy to wise energy is what separates the men who attract respect from the ones who attract short-term pity. Because when you share your story too early and it sounds unresolved, it puts pressure on her. It makes her feel like she's responsible for proving something to you, when she hasn't even figured out how she feels yet. That's not connection. That's emotional debt. And no woman wants to be the payment plan for your past pain. So save the scars for later. Not because you're hiding them, but because a man who's truly healed doesn't lead with the wound. He leads with his peace. And once she sees that peace, she'll want to know how you got there. Now, let's move into another mistake. One that looks confident on the surface, but underneath, it screams insecurity. Let's talk about why trying to prove your value often backfires completely. Number 5. Overcompensating with flashy confidence. There's a certain type of confidence older men think women want. The loud, polished, look-at-me confidence. The kind that shows up as stories about money, name-dropping places, brands, connections, subtle flexes about what you've built, what you own, where you've been. And sure, it looks confident, it sounds powerful, it might even get her attention for a moment. But deep down, she knows exactly what it is. Compensation, noise, a shield you wear to protect your ego from the truth you're still not comfortable facing. That part of you doesn't feel like enough without all that. And women, especially emotionally intelligent ones, can spot this type of performance a mile away. Here's the reality most men never accept. True confidence is quiet. True presence doesn't need proof. The moment you start trying to signal value is the moment she questions if you actually have it. Think about it. Does a lion need to growl every time it enters the room? Number, it just walks. Slow, steady, powerful. Not because it's trying to prove anything, but because it knows what it is. If you need to be heard, seen, validated, praised, you're not leading the energy. You're chasing it. And when you chase, you fall out of frame. Instead, you want to move like a man who doesn't need her attention, but earns it anyway through presence, through restraint, through subtleties, your eye contact, your tone, the way you take your time, the way you ask questions, the way you let her feel seen, not overwhelmed. Because attraction isn't built through performance. It's built through emotional contrast. She doesn't want you to talk about being powerful. She wants to feel that you are. And when you stop selling your value, you start becoming the man she wants to understand, not just hear. So cut the performance. Speak with weight. Let your posture do the flexing. Let your stillness say what your words are trying too hard to express. Because once you become the man who's done proving himself, you start becoming the man she actually desires. Now let's talk about a mistake that's less obvious, but even more dangerous. It's what happens when a man treats every conversation like it's a transaction, instead of a moment to build curiosity. Number 6. Acting like every conversation needs a result. You approach the woman. You start the conversation, and in the back of your mind, you're already wondering, where is this going? Will I get her number? Is she into me? Should I make a move? And just like that, you're no longer with her. You're with the outcome, and she can feel it. You're no longer responding to her words. You're reacting to your internal agenda. You're not flirting. You're negotiating with a smile. That's what women sense, even if you're being polite. And that's when the energy starts to collapse. Here's what most older men don't realize. Flirting isn't a mission. It's an emotional experience. When you try to get something from the interaction, whether it's her number, her validation, her interest, you create pressure that repels her instinctively. Why? Because women don't fall for men who need the moment to go somewhere. They fall for men who can sit in the moment and lead it, with no fear of where it goes. That's what creates tension. That's what creates presence. That's what says, I'm not here for approval. I'm here to explore the energy. And if it's not there, I'll walk, with peace. That's what makes her curious. That's what makes her want to stay. Because now you're not a man who's chasing a result. You're a man who creates an experience. And that is what she remembers. You're calm. You're observant. You're not trying to get somewhere, but she still wants to follow your lead. That kind of control isn't loud. It's felt. And it's rare. Most men don't even realize they're doing it, rushing the energy, trying to close, trying to create a spark by forcing rhythm. But women are rhythmic creatures. They feel when something flows. They feel when a man is holding space, not just trying to cash in. So when you stop trying to impress and you start being present, that's when the entire tone of the interaction shifts. She doesn't feel sold. She feels seen. She doesn't feel pressure. She feels pulled. And the best part? Even if nothing comes from it, she leaves thinking about you because you were different. You didn't treat her like a prize to be won. You treated her like a moment to be shared. And that is exactly what makes you unforgettable. Now that brings us to something deeper. A mistake that doesn't just come from insecurity, but from misreading her completely. Number 7, misreading interest as availability. She's laughing. She's complimenting you. She's responding to your texts. She might even be making long eye contact or getting a little physical. And you think, she's into me. But here's the hard truth most older men overlook. Interest doesn't equal availability. Engagement doesn't mean she's emotionally open. Women, especially attractive, emotionally complex women, have learned how to entertain conversations, enjoy your attention, soak in your presence, without ever making themselves truly vulnerable. They'll flirt, they'll lean in, they'll compliment you just enough to keep your focus on them, but they won't actually let you in. Why? Because a lot of women aren't looking for depth. They're looking for a feeling, validation, distraction, a momentary escape from their own boredom or self-doubt. And if you're the kind of man who confuses that moment of attention with long-term potential, you'll find yourself investing your energy into something that was never meant to be real. Older men, especially those who are emotionally available, often assume that if she's engaged, smiling, vibing, it means there's a connection. But what you're missing is emotional intent. Is she curious about you? Does she ask meaningful questions? Is she following up or initiating? Does she create space for the conversation to expand? Or is she just being sweet because it's safe to smile at a man who's clearly mature and polite? Here's what women respect. A man who can enjoy the moment, but still read the room. Who doesn't confuse friendliness for desire. Who doesn't need to ask, "So when are we seeing each other again?" Because he already knows if the door is open or not. When you understand this difference, you stop wasting energy, you stop chasing ghosts, and most importantly, you stop giving emotional weight to women who were never willing to carry any of yours. You show restraint, you observe more, you vet her the same way she's silently vetting you. And that's when you start attracting women who are actually ready, not just curious. So don't take every glance, every compliment, every lingering moment as a green light. Take it as data. And when you feel that deeper signal, that eye contact that holds something real, you'll know. Now let's move into the final and possibly most dangerous mistake older men make. The one that happens when you slowly give up your power just to keep her around. Number 8. Giving up your masculine frame to avoid rejection. It starts small. You adjust your tone to sound more pleasant. You avoid disagreeing so you don't come off difficult. You laugh at something that wasn't funny, just to keep the mood light. And suddenly, you're no longer the man she was drawn to. You've slipped out of your frame, not because she demanded it, but because you feared rejection. This is the most dangerous mistake older men make, not because it's loud or obvious, but because it's slow, subtle, silent. You bend just a little to keep her interested. You soften your edge to avoid seeming harsh. You hide your standards so she doesn't think you're too intense. And what happens? She loses interest, not because you were too strong, but because you became too soft for your own truth. Here's the thing. A woman may flirt with the man who pleases her, but she respects and desires the man who doesn't need to. When you give up your masculine frame, you stop leading, you stop challenging, you stop being the grounded force that keeps the energy polarized. And without that polarity, there's no attraction. Women test, they push, they provoke emotion, not because they want to break you, but because they want to feel the weight of your stability. They want to know, can he hold the storm without flinching? But if you crumble at the first sign of tension, if you start molding yourself into who you think she wants, you disappear. She doesn't reject you for being too much. She forgets you for being nothing at all. And listen, this isn't about being dominant, aggressive, or cold. It's about being centered. It's about honoring your values, even if it means walking away. It's about not letting a woman's presence rearrange your identity, but allowing her to witness it, respect it, and choose to enter it. Because the man who fears rejection will always reject parts of himself first. So hold your frame, not with ego, not with anger, but with calm conviction. Because the moment you stop trying to keep her is the moment she finally feels the pull to stay. Flirting isn't about charm. It's not about tricks, lines, or polished delivery. It's about energy. It's about presence. It's about how you carry yourself when nothing needs to happen, but everything is possible. Most older men fail at flirting not because they're too old, but because they're too disconnected from their masculine truth. They trade presence for performance. They trade standards for safety. They trade wisdom for wounded validation. And every time they do, they become invisible. But you've seen too much, felt too much, lived too much to keep making quiet compromises that kill attraction. Because deep down, you know this. The moment you stop seeking to be liked is the moment you start becoming unforgettable. So stop talking to impress. Start listening to feel. Stop trying to close the conversation. Start holding the tension. Stop giving away your frame to be accepted. Start walking in a way that makes her want to enter your world without you lifting a finger. And if you've made these mistakes before, good, because now you're aware. And a man who's aware is dangerous. Drop a comment below. No more approval, only presence. If you're done dimming your energy just to keep the conversation going, like this video if it woke something up in you, subscribe for more brutally honest masculine truths to help you lead, attract, and live like a high-value man. Because this isn't about flirting. It's about identity. And the world's already full of men who want to be liked. Be the man who's respected,